Welcome back to another Youth-Centered podcast. We are in week 9 of the new normal here at the Youth Center. Hope everyone is healthy and safe as we try to fight through this, and I think we are seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, and we are moving towards that light. We're not standing still. So this week's podcast, I'm very excited to have Brian Fraser from North Andover Cable Access. I've gotten to know Brian over the years for some tremendous work that he's done, and he's obviously been very supportive of us at the Youth Center. And I'd be remiss if I did not give them complete credit for me starting the podcast itself 2 years ago. I brought the idea to IT Director Chris McClure, who talked to Brian Fraser, and interestingly enough, they both had the same question to me: do people listen to podcasts? And obviously, I was passionate about it, and Brian was unbelievable. Gave me one of his staff members who kind of trained me. We used cable access equipment for about a year, and then through a grant, we were able to buy our own equipment. So obviously, we have a high opinion of cable access, and we're going to get into it, why we think that this has been an incredible opening for a lot of people, how much cable access really does, and we'll get into that in depth. So first of all, welcome to our Youth-Centered podcast, Brian. Glad you could make it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. We always kind of work in parallel with each other, and it's not, we try and help out as much as we can. So it's good to be on a joint project.
Absolutely. So, Brian, a lot of people know who you are, and you tend to be the guy behind the camera calling the shots and things like that. But people probably have recognized the face before, but maybe not know 100% who is Brian Fraser. How do you get involved with this business all the way up to, leading NACAM? So can you give us a little bit of the files on Brian Fraser?
Sure. So I've been in video production all the way since high school. I was fortunate to have 4 years in high school way back when. That was kind of unheard of at the time. But so 4 years in high school, all through college. After college, I ended up working with a production facility. They hired me off the street from production. I was doing corporate stuff, and they basically were. They sold industry product, whether it's cameras not cameras, lighting and grip and all that kind of stuff. And it's easier to teach industry people sales, not salespeople the industry, because it's very intricate with all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So I was there for about 10 years, and then I ended up at North Andover Cam in about 2008. I've always been behind the scenes, so you might not see me on camera that much, but it's fun to bring video to people. And with cable access, it's great because it's just part of the community. So coming from the broadcast end of things, I feel like I've brought a higher quality of production to, what we all know in the past is cable access. It can be throw a camera on a tripod and just kind of shoot things. But we take a meaningful approach to everything. And I think across the land, most of the cable access stations are really up in their game with production value.
So cable access, I'm not sure how long it's been around in North Andover or most communities, but give us a little history of North Andover's cable access and, how it actually started, actually in terms of how's your program even funded, et cetera.
Yep. So most towns had cable access, and it was provided by the cable company. So I think, it was Media One, and then Comcast bought them out. It was a lot of transitions over time. And so when it was Comcast run, it's really impersonal. So the Comcast, the cable companies were mandated to have this open access for the public. Basically it was, we can teach you how to use a camera, and then go out and, we'll put on any content that you want to put on. But they didn't promote it very well. They really weren't interested in it. So as the cable access stations had the option to become like a nonprofit, the cable companies didn't want their hands in it. They wanted to produce, they wanted to provide cable services, not produce local television. So these nonprofits started happening. And, that all started happening between I'd say early 2000, in that range, they were all starting to become nonprofits. So North Andover became nonprofit in 2004, and you might have known Ellie. She was the executive director before me, and then when I came in 2008, I just absorbed into the community. So community television, it's a federally kind of mandated thing where there's a percentage of the cable company revenue that is mandated to come back for cable access.
Right.
So those funny little charges at the end of your cable bill, we might all complain about them, but one of those is for us. And our goal and our mission is to return that value right back into the community. So we do that by, covering, promoting as much stuff in the community as possible. We cover all the meetings, the board meetings through the government, and we produce town meeting coverage, that type of stuff, and as well as all our educational services, where we're educating people on how to make media and providing top-of-the-line equipment so that they don't have to rent it, or, it's thousands of dollars if you really want to rent a solid piece of equipment for a production. So we make all those services available to people, and in return, whether it's the skill set of the staff. My background is broadcast, lighting. I'm going to jump right into our staff. Go
ahead.
At the studio, but so there's 4 full-timers, including me. I have extensive, cinema background as far as motion picture, not like movies, but like, video and TV production. So I bring that skill set with lighting. Susan Martin has been fantastic. She's studying marketing, so she's bringing kind of that to the table, and she's well versed in video production and editing. Ray De Silva is our programming coordinator, and he's programming the channels. Does a lot of editing. I've probably been partnering with him the most during this COVID time, just because we're navigating, some of the new stuff with the meetings, the meeting coverage, remote meeting coverage, and stuff like that. But they all, the whole staff can shoot and edit and teach. Being able to be, friendly and open to the community and inviting. Bill Robert is on board to take a lot of the kind of the technical stuff off of my shoulders, so that I can be an executive director and promote and do outreach and things along those lines. But one of the things I heard from before I came in was, it was not as accessible. So my ambition was to just make sure that people knew that the resources were there for them, and be inviting. So trying to bring staff in that was very inviting, very accepting of people's ideas and stuff like that. Because at the end, good.
Yeah, big shout out to Susan Martin, because Susan is the one that actually got our youth-centered podcast up and running. And I loved her energy, her passion, her expertise. And as she will tell you, I was not the most technologically savvy person when I started this podcast. The fact that I'm actually my own engineer now is amazing. But all of your staff, Bill came in and did a lot of getting our software set up and everything, and just some tremendous people that I don't think people know enough about of what really goes on that. Let me ask you, when you came in 2008, I remember, obviously, you're in a new home, which I want you to talk about, but for years you were at the high school. Was Cam at any place else besides that before the high school?
I think they were in the old Johnson High School. So as Comcast, and in 2004 the school was built.
Correct.
So as that transition happened, I think that's when they took the opportunity to go nonprofit, and so that transition to the new high school was the transition to.
So when the new high school was open, it was there. You had a nice studio there, but then I want to know how it came about that you basically got your site down on Main Street. And if you have not been there, you need to. Obviously, when we open up again and it's safe, I really ask you to come down and see the great work down there. But great space down there. How did that all come about?
So we did, as the new with the cable companies, you have 10-year contracts with the town, and we're kind of a partner in that. So as we were doing the studies for that, we did the measurements for the existing space. So we had, and I've said this story a million times, we had in the school 1,400 square feet. 400 square feet of that was hallway, bathroom, and foyer. So of the remaining 1,000 square feet, about 70% of that could be checked out by membership, being the studio, the control room, and all that kind of stuff. 300 square feet doesn't leave a lot of room for running a business or, just kind of growth of programming and stuff like that. So some of the things that were inherently limiting at the other facility were the edit stations were in the studio along the wall. So if you had a TV production going on in the studio and you had 4 edit bays, it was hard to have anybody editing with all the ruckus going on in the production studio, or maybe you had room for one, edit bay to work because the camera's kind of smushed into where the edit bays were. So, and you run a multi-program type facility. Sure. So if all of a sudden, you had to have half the basketball court dedicated to something else, it's hard to run a basketball program in what we're both working in is after hours time, right? Sure. So after your work hours, after school hours, it's already a premium of time slots as it is. But if you can't run multiple programs, then it's tough to grow. So doing that simple math, it just made it clear that we needed to be in a bigger space to grow. A lot of the cable access studios across the state were included in the schools, so I know at some point, this like state funding that helps, build these schools, and the bigger footprint you have, the more support you get from the state, something along those lines. Not an expert, but that, that type of thing. So, it made sense at the time for the town to go in that direction. But a lot, and it's great access to the students, but students, youth is always looking for workshops. The problem we had at the high school was the entire community felt that what we did was for the kids because it was out of school. It was like a inherent barrier for adults to feel like it was their station or they had access to it. And it took a lot of convincing for adults to come in and produce shows and whatnot. And cable access stations are more successful when they have more adults running the shows. I mean, we love the kids. Over half our membership is youth, and we couldn't do half the stuff we do without the youth, and we love the youth. But as far as ongoing shows, usually if you look at a snapshot of all the other TV stations, it's early retirees, that have just retired and, they're looking for hobbies and whatnot. I mean, those are the people that lock into our volunteer crew. And we're just starting to get into that traction now that we're into the new building. Being in the high school is great because you had a lot of high school traffic that would learn about us and come use us for school projects and whatnot. So we've lost a lot of that kind of walk-in traffic from the high school students. But our after-school workshops are just as full as they ever were with 4th and 5th graders, middle school, and then high school is where we're just going to learn to penetrate again, just so that we still have a little bit of a presence there with Paul Mayette, and he's teaching a class over there. So there's some crossover, and we'd be willing to do after-school programming over there too. So.
How much space do you have on the Main Street site?
So the new space we're super excited about is it's 4,200 square feet.
Wow.
And it allows us to have the administrative offices that we need, whereas before our 2 of our staff members, their desks were in the control room with the server. So It was like whirring machines, and you couldn't talk on the phone with a vendor or anything like that. So we've office space, and then the other 2/3 of the building is all dedicated to programming, whether it's our kitchen set, edit bays, a professional edit suite where you can kind of shelter in place and not be disturbed. We're slowly moving into the podcasting world too. We'll have a podcasting room over there. and our server is locked away in a server room where it should be, so it's not disturbing any workflow or production value. Just having that noise constant in the whole space was tough. And then our studio is double the size of what it was at the studio at the high school. So it was 21 by 29, and now it's 30 by 40. I mean, it's a gorgeous space. With TV production, the more space you have, the more production value you can have on your set. So you get a little bit more depth in the background, fancier colors on the back wall because you're further away from the set. In the technical world, that's you want big. Even though it's still just one set, it's going to look that much better because we have all the.
I mean, it is a beautiful site, and obviously when we get back to some kind of normalcy, Brian will probably have another open house so people can see it. I love also where it is in terms of the buildup of what I call Lower Main Street. Mm-hmm. That whole area with the Bradstreet School, which was obviously the site is on the site of the old Bradstreet School. But, J&M and the, Gordon Physical Therapy and all the things down there. It's been a nice real addition to Lower Main Street, which is great. Let me, not to criticize predecessors of you of what was done before, but since you've been here, and I think you said 2008, I've seen an increase in programming and a variety of programs. Can you talk a little bit, again, pre-pandemic, but what are some of the vision that you had for programming, and what are some of the great programs that you do know that people are checking out? I mean, obviously you do a phenomenal job with selectmen's meeting, finance committee meeting, health committee meeting, all of those important government committee meetings, but what about programming?
So programming, and just to make sure everybody is aware, so we run all three channels in the town. So we have a government channel that's mostly either town, state, or federal government programming. That's where you find most of those meetings. The education channel, which is content, a little bit of a hybrid, is content from the school department, or education and related. And or our members may produce content and put it on there, kind of through the sports, right? So we have volunteer members that will cover all the high school sports, and then that stuff will go onto that channel too. And then there's the public access channel, which is everything else. So churches, special interests, activists, that type of thing. So if anybody's, wants to do anything, a show, or put their church service on the air, or if they want to do a poetry show or any special interest, they can put that on the public access channel. And we're there to support it. People ask us all the time, do you want this type of show? And we want any type of show, but do you have this type of show on? It doesn't matter. If you want to put it out there, that's what we're there for. If we have a cooking show, we'll take 10 more. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. We're not bound to advertisers. We're not bound to ratings. Our success is if you got on the channel what you were interested in, right? So we're not lining up a programming slot. Oh, we need a cooking show. We need a sports show. It's really there for public access, and we're there to help you get your ideas on TV. We did a lot. We've had a handful of regular series shows. Every town's a little bit different. Sister town in Andover seems to have more like repetitive shows every 2 weeks, whether it's the clergy or selectmen will do a show or something like that. We have 2 or 3 that are series, but we have a lot of one-off shows. We have a lot of poetry this month, wrestling, that type of thing. And it's eclectic in that way, which is fine. But we'd love to have more people that want to kind of lock in and do a cooking show every week or every other week or whatnot. I mean, I'm going to self-promote the same idea. Since I came here, I said, let's do a poker charity show. So, it was big when I started. Texas Hold'em was on TV all the time. But I still think having our local celebrities play the game, our local businesses donate for the player, right? So they, a business donates $50 for that player to be at the seat, and then before the game they pluck out a charity that the winnings will go to.
Sure.
So now you've kind of trifolded every aspect of the town, whether it's local businesses, local people that are, your police chief or something like, just your local celebrities, and then charities in town. So like everybody's kind of getting exposure, and that's how I approach a lot of the stuff, is how can we get more people involved and benefiting from the exposure of these ideas. So if anybody wants to help me with that idea, I'm still dying to get that show going.
I love the idea, and I want to be in the chair next to Chief McCarthy, because I do think I could probably beat him in Texas Hold'em. But so one of the things I've been pretty outspoken about to my bosses, D. Casey and Melissa Rodriguez, as well as my staff, is I believe that you and your department have been the hardest working crew during this pandemic, and I know everybody is doing a great job. But you guys have taken on, in my opinion, a whole new life during this pandemic as a way of communicating to our residents and getting the word out and stuff. Talk to me a little bit about what it's been like since March, and as well as some of the creative things that you're doing. And if you can kind of delve into something that you and I got involved in, and happily so, is the class of 2020, trying to make it special for them. So talk a little bit about the pandemic and all the things that you are doing, because you guys are working a ton of hours.
It's definitely changed and ramped up almost immediately. And just to jump on what you said, so you said a department. So just to make sure everybody knows, we're not a town department. We're a complete,
correct,
independent agency. But our sole mission is to serve the town. So we're very much in sync with everything the town does. But yes, everything changed. And we went from like a 3-channel focus, public, education, and government, to really, gravitating really to the government side, right? So we became a sole conduit for, direct information from the town. And as the closures happened, and as the governor changed some of the provisions to the open meeting law temporarily, we became the only public access to any of the proceedings that are going on in town. So where you have an open meeting, society, any of the board, the selectmen, the board of health, you have the right to walk into any of those meetings because it's an open meeting. Well, that stopped happening as soon as COVID happened. So we've been under the gun to make sure that these meetings are all televised, whether they were normally televised by us or not. Anything that was deemed an open meeting, we cover. So they slowed down on some of the advisory boards, and have just been meeting, for the needed meetings.
How has that been going? Because that's new territory. Again, selectmen and certain committees have been filmed before, but these meetings that are set up, everything people know is Zoom style and everything else. How have that actually been going?
It's been going. I feel it's been going really well. I mean, as soon as the changes happened, Melissa, the town manager, invited us to be part of the discussion when they were writing policy, and okay, how can we handle this, and working with Chris McClure, the IT director. All right, how do you want to handle this? How can we handle this? What are the capabilities? We had all the technology in place already between Chris and I to just automatically adapt to the needs of the time. So we were streaming the services live, the meetings live anyway, but we just had to adapt to the remote Zoom, they're on Google Meet,
right.
So they came up with a policy so that we could just make it as clean as possible and as reliable as possible. So we quickly learned after the first meeting, we were bringing in the Zoom call, the Google call, and we were televising it. We had a backup record at the studio, but we quickly went, well, what happened if we lost this internet feed? We'd lose every record or any instance of the meeting. So,
Sure.
At the very next meeting, we fired up the same system at town hall internally so that we were recording the call on a whole separate location and recording and, broadcasting the call out onto the air. So redundancy is important. So we had to just make sure we had some fail safes there. I think the meetings, other than, their end of things of normally, seeing each other or bringing in, paperwork to show each other, they've gone all digital. The meetings have seemed to, from my end, I've been on every one of them at this point because we just wanted to make sure that, everybody was covering all the bases, and a lot of the rest of the staff is working at home. So I've been covering most of the meetings, and it seems seamless, other than the obvious, not in the same room type of thing. But the business that has been able to happen has been happening, without interference with the technology, which is great.
So the meetings do seem to be going well, and I liked it just from the minute that Melissa had to tell us to kind of close up shop a little bit. We didn't stop what we were doing. So meetings started right away, which was great. Then I immediately saw, and you obviously, and again, we got to give a big shout out to Chris McClure and his department, who has worked very closely with Brian and to make this all happen. But then I started to see in the early weeks of this weekly reports from our town manager, and then you've brought a lot of people on. I actually came in on one day, but you've had the fire chief, the police chief, the superintendent. What was the whole goal of that?
I just thought it was really important to get the faces out there. I mean, from the very first one we did, it was, there was so much information, different, whether it was from the CDC or from the World Health Organization down to the president, and then everybody's watching the news, which had all kinds of different information. I felt it was important, and the town agreed, was, get our two figureheads, the town manager and the superintendent, on air together, so that it was clear that they were talking and that the message was in sync with each other, and that at least whatever was going on in the rest of the world, in our town, the message is firm, and everybody's on the same page, and they jumped on that. And then again, just getting your local board of health, so that that's the most streamlined information you can get. They're getting it straight from the state's getting it from the Fed. The every time you felt panic, at least my advice to people is like, just go back to the source.
Right.
I heard a story, I watch the financial news all the time, and at the tail end of one random show, it was like, and if you have high blood pressure, you're more susceptible. It was like, whoa, wait a minute. You go right back to the CDC, and it was like, well, no, it's this heart failure, it's this heart disease. It's, but people would just say things off the cuff, and then you'd start to worry about whatever, issues your father's having or whatever, It's about the streamlined information. Since early on, maybe a week or two into it, like the disease hasn't changed, right? So there's a lot of variables and a lot of economic turmoil and whatnot, but like at the heart of it, the disease hasn't changed, and the safety measures really haven't changed. I mean, it got to the point where we're mask on mask, and that's what we're doing here today.
Sure.
And I know that changed in the beginning, but the more people got worried, the more people locked themselves in the house, and the more people just kept watching the negative stuff of the news, the more worried and paralyzed people became.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the most important part, is to realize life goes on. If there's any part of this that's a new normal, you just gotta adapt and go along with it, and from being as busy as I've been working 10, 12-hour days with this pandemic, just because the day stretches out, we're covering stuff with the announcements and then the meetings at night. I'm out and about more, just as much as I ever had. So my life hasn't changed, and I feel for the people that are pinned in, because
Correct.
They're like a polar opposite of me. Like I'm out here and I'm safe. You know what I mean? I mean, yes, there's risk, but the sun's shining, the air's blowing around. I mean, it's still fine.
For sure.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about, so you're taking on a huge thing, and you're one of the architects of this. We both sit on a committee, for any other word, I'll call it, class of 2020 committee on senior activities. And there's a good 20 plus on us, and some wonderful people from the community, obviously from the school, et cetera. And you're one of the main players in this, Brian, in terms of, we are going to have a virtual scholarship night. We're going to have a virtual awards program, things that we took for granted. And then we're going to do something we've never done in the history of North Andover, in terms of, we're going to have a virtual graduation. A little bit about how that came about, and let's not minimize it. This is a lot of work for you, your department, and obviously school personnel. How are we going to pull this off?
Well, as soon as they made the decision that school was closed for the rest of the year, it was, jumping on the phone, sending emails. What are we going to do about graduation? Because it has to happen. But I think the sentiment right away was, not only how is it going to happen, but how do we make it, meaningful, right? I mean, we could, have the principal stand up and just read a list of names of the graduates, and that's that. But, how do you make it personable? How do you make it still, an impactful occasion for these seniors? This is their once in a lifetime senior graduation. So it's all the senior events, the scholarship night, the awards day, graduation. Lot of meetings, but at the end of the day, it's for all three events. We're trying to get as many people to record the speeches that they would have given on site. Submit it to us. We're basically pre-producing whatever we can. So we're going to pre-produce everything so it runs on the same day that it would have run anyway. But we're having the donors record their announcements and their speeches, the award givers during awards day, and then the graduation. The school department decided to, and every town's doing it. Everybody's making up, their own reality. So North Andover has decided to. They had sent out surveys to the students and their families, and they said, "What's the most important thing to you?" And they said they wanted to receive their graduation, their diploma, and they wanted their immediate family there. Those were like the two top most things that came back off that survey, if I'm remembering the call properly. So their solution was to basically break up graduation, or at least the procession. So they're doing, I think it's 5 days of the processional. That we're going to set up the stage in the gym at the field house, and one family at a time will come in, be able to cross the stage, receive their diploma, and take pictures. The families wanted to be able to take the picture of the receiving the diploma. So that's spread out over 6 days, that's 6 days of production that we have to, it's 6-hour days, an hour in between, hour break each day. That's a lot different than an hour ceremony for a typical graduation on a Friday night. So we're definitely happy to do it. We're coordinating with them how to set up the staging so that it looks as quality as it can on TV, because now we're that's their sole way of seeing it. We're gonna have it broadcast on that. Was it the 5th? What's that Friday?
Correct, the 5th.
Yeah. Broadcast on that Friday. It'll also be streamed live on our channel. And we'll put it out to YouTube so that if it gets real busy and our servers get overloaded, they can watch it on the YouTube live, the YouTube stream. It's a lot. It's a lot of collaboration. Paul Mayette is the media teacher at the high school. He's taken on the award ceremony to edit for us. We've come up with ways for people. You can't just email a video file, right? It's just too big. So we've come up with ways to, file mail server it over so it bounces off the cloud and we can download it and we sort it all out. It's a collaborative effort. The staff has been working from home this whole time, but with file transfers and whatnot, I'm running around shooting all day long. I come in, I stick a card in a computer, and they download it to their computer at home, and then they edit it all out. So, you might see me running around, but they're doing most of the work with the editing. So, and they're keeping up fantastically. I mean, they've really put out so much stuff. It's great.
Yeah, big shout out to Paul Mayette too, obviously collaborating with you. And again, even on this committee, there's so many people involved. And again, I know it's not the perfect world. I know it's not exactly what we'd want for our graduation, and I feel terrible that they cannot have what we're all used to having. But I can't impress upon the community enough the amount of work that's being done by all of these people with the school system, as well as people like you, to pull this off. And we are excited to see how it all goes down.
Yeah. It's daunting thinking about the three of them and the 20 plus people on the call. But as long as we're getting those speeches submitted on time, the editing, it's a TV show for us. It's we just want quality, so we're going to take the extra time to polish it a little bit and make sure, but it's all the front end stuff that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Getting those videos in, getting people to not shoot it from
Yeah, exactly.
the weirdest angle you can. But so we put out a lot of guidance. Susan and Ray put together a cheat sheet basically for people that can shoot on their phone, and then the MCs, whether it's Chet Jackson or the superintendent, they'll come in. We'll get them on a stage and shoot them with the cameras that we have. And with the award ceremonies, we really wanted to go out of our way to get the speeches pre-recorded and then kind of roll them in live while the principal is there emceeing it, so that he can see them and maybe react to them or give them the opportunity to react to them, rather than just cut from one pre-recorded thing to another because it would be really dry.
Right.
It would be emotionless. So hopefully by getting the presenters to submit early and then rolling them in a kind of a live to tape event, it'll be a little bit more organic and a little bit more like it was the day of the event type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, we're all excited for this. Between Brian's group and obviously the school, they will get good information out to you with exact times, how to access. But it is going to be something that we're going to be excited to celebrate the class of 2020 in these variety of ways. And again, big shout out to you, Brian, for all the stuff. We're running a little bit out of time. I got two more questions for you, and one of them is, as we grow as a community and we're hearing more about cable access, how do people get more involved? How do they bring an idea to you? I mean, I've heard you say at the beginning of this podcast that we're open to a lot of different things. How does that all go from basically someone sitting in their living room right now to have a thought for a show and then actually come to fruition to actually get it on cable access?
Yep, we're a volunteer organization, so our staff is there to teach and educate people on how to do it and support them. Whoever's got interest, we're gonna support them shoulder to shoulder as much as we can. But you're on your seat and you say, I want to do a cooking show. Come on down. You sign up as a member, and then we'll kind of go through the ins and outs of producing a TV show, and whether it's a little bit of pre-planning, and if you can do a 5th grade outline, that's all you really need to produce a show, and then we just take it step by step. If you want to just put a camera on a tripod and shoot a one shot and say your piece or cook your dish, and we want to put it on air, we put it on air. If you want to put it on air, we put it on air. And then you go, hey, wait, maybe I want a title or I want the recipe up on air. Okay, we can add those elements. It doesn't have to be all polished up front. It can be daunting, for somebody coming off their couch. So we encourage baby steps, and there's some there's some detail-oriented people out there that want to just polish it up right away, and that's fine too. We'll go through the whole process, but really it's as simple as come down with your idea. We'll sit, we'll talk with you, and figure out the best way for you to produce your show based on your schedule, based on your level of interest or capabilities, and encourage it to grow, right? So you could just always, put it out there as just one camera shot and go. But if we see the excitement in somebody, we'll encourage them to go to take another step in a month or two or whatnot. It's baby steps. We're not the same thing. We're not accountable to advertisers. It's really what you want to put out there and what you're comfortable putting out there. Some of the neat stuff with the COVID scenario right now is we've had a little bit more engagement with some of our shows that only, we're doing, one show a quarter. With Zoom, it's a little bit easier to kind of just get a Zoom show together. We pass it through the studio, put the titles up. She can get her guests on, Joan Kulash and her Community Inroads show, which is all nonprofit, promotions. And she's been doing it almost every 2 weeks. So it's been food banks. It's been, really needed information that's getting out there. So I'm just glad it's making some of the turnout of this technology because of COVID has kind of brought more people out and getting more voices out there.
So let's give you the final word. One thing I'd like to know, maybe a two-part final word. I would like to know what Brian Fraser has learned during, professionally during this pandemic. And at the same breath, maybe a last word to our residents regarding cable access and, getting through this pandemic, but the future of cable access.
I thought about the question. Professionally, I just being in the community where we're in the information industry, and it doesn't stop, right? And it became more needed at this point. We didn't, community television was a fun element. It was something that, it was just a hobby or for people or whatnot. But it got real important real fast, with COVID. Being out there, being needed, getting the information out so people felt safer. I mean, that to me, that was our automatic first goal. Stop worrying. Here's the right information. And being out there when it was dangerous. I mean, one of the shoots I did, it was the only thing that kind of made my skin crawl a little bit out of all the, being out in public. I went out to the urgent care facility where they were doing the rapid testing. I felt it was important to show people how orderly it was, how careful they were, to encourage people to go so that they didn't think it was too much chaos and put themselves in danger. I just went there, but it was just a little creep factor. You knew people were there because they were diagnosed with symptoms, so out of all the shoots, that was the one thing but it was important, so it's about stepping up, and being part of the greater good, and getting that information out there to serve people better and make sure that, people are out there. So, professionally, I just feel like so many challenges were thrown our way, and we just had to figure out the technology, the procedure, and the limitations. So we all bounced off each other and said, "Can we do this? Yes. What's the risk of failure here? Okay." So there was a balance. So it was really a good lesson in not having a ceiling, setting the expectations so that it was reliable. So it was really about just getting it done in the best way so that it was reliable.
And I got to tell you, Brian, and not say because you're in front of me right now, the amount of work you and your staff have done has been very, very impressive. I don't know all the other communities' cable access, but I'd put what you guys have done to help us through this period as the top group on this, and you continue to do great work with that. So, again, thank you for coming on the podcast to also clarify to people a little bit about what cable access is. And in a lot of ways, we talk about the new normal, the new cable access. I think there's going to be a lot of need and uses that people are going to reach out to you when we get back to somewhat of a new normal, and we can kind of get that information out. Do you want to say something?
So now that, reopening's happening and whatnot,
Sure.
Our next little endeavor is to just get a little bit more entertainment on the channels, right?
Absolutely.
So our access channel, we're going to be hopefully partnering with Acting Out a little bit and just get some distraction out there.
Sure.
Right? So local singing, local acting. We'll talk to Sarah Durkin and Justin Smalley. Get a little bit more lighthearted stuff on the air. And
Yeah, we may want to connect too, because we've rolled out, we're in our second week now, and we're excited about our virtual program we're doing for the spring, because we are closed for the spring. Very optimistic we're going to be back open in some way in the summertime, but might be a good way to connect with you to get it out even more, because what we are trying to do is have a lot of fun too. So Our Zoom classes are educational, they're fun, they're goofy. We're doing game shows and things like that. So maybe that's something else we could connect with too. But again, Brian, thank you once again for coming on the Youth-Centered Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We will continue to do this. We're hoping to get back into our podcast studio and not out here in the lounge. But, when we get the guidelines that we slowly start to open up, and as Brian said, we are going to be slowly through phases. We will be opening up and getting back to what will be our new normal. So again, thank you, Brian, and all the good people down at Cable Access. And as we finish every podcast, we always say too much passion is never enough passion.